If you would please make your way in and take your seats, that would be great. So we're going to go ahead and get started, otherwise we'll be here all evening. Hopefully the people out in the hall will filter their way in. Good evening and welcome to the 2018 Ocean Sciences meeting in the beautiful Oregon Convention Center in downtown Portland. On behalf of the organizing committee and my co-chairs, Dick Kraut and Kay Beidel, we are excited that you're here and hope you'll have a tremendous meeting. Thank you for coming. My name is Frederick Bingham from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I'll be moderating our program this evening. My co-chairs, Dick Kraut and Kay Beidel, are sitting right in the front row, observing this. Before we jump into the program, I wanted to spend a few minutes giving you some preliminary information about the meeting. We have a lot of great special events and programmed activities for you beyond the usual scientific sessions that I'd like to make you aware of. First, there are science plenaries on Tuesday at 10:30. The speakers will be John DeBeery from Stanford and Claudia Benitez Nelson from the University of South Carolina. Society Award Talks will be at 10:30 a.m. on Wednesday. We have a wrap-up plenary on Friday at 4:15 by Mike McFadden, who will be giving his impressions of the meeting and his thoughts on the future of the field. And finally, one last-minute special addition to the program, NOAA Assistant Administrator Tim Gallaudet will be speaking on Thursday at 12:45. All the plenaries will be in this room except for Tim Gallaudet. I don't remember if he's here or in one of the other rooms. Our thanks to all the plenary speakers for the generous donation of their time. There are loads of student early career activities at this meeting, pop-up talks, mentoring activities, agency breakfasts among them. We have a jam session Tuesday evening, a Pechakucha event on Wednesday, a fun run Thursday morning, and a film screening on Thursday evening. We have art exhibits in the halls all week. I hope you have already managed to spend some time looking at that wonderful art that we have on display outside. All of this exists at the interface between art and science, which I hope you will have a chance to think about this week. We've tried very hard to make this meeting friendly, welcoming, and fun for everybody, and especially for students and early career folks. On a related note, if you have not done so already, please sign up to be a student paper evaluator or a mentor. The students here really appreciate your time and your expertise to help them make better presentations in the future. Finally, take advantage of this great city and all that it has to offer. We're very lucky to be here. A meeting like this does not just happen. There are many people who have spent countless hours trying to make it a reality, and I want to spend just a minute or two acknowledging some of them. To save time, let's just hold our applause until the end, and we can all do that at the end. But please stand as I call your name and remain standing. First of all, the organizing committee consists of my co-chairs, fellow co-chairs, Dick Kraut and Kay Beidel. Dick and Kay, would you please stand? Later, we'll have a chance to applaud all these people later. Vice chairs, Alessandra Conversi, Margie Friedrichs, and Camille Pagniello. Are any of you here? Okay. There's a larger program committee with about 25 members. There's too many to name individually, but their work is still much appreciated. If you're on that committee, would you please stand if you were on that committee? Anybody here? Yay. All right. This meeting is a collaboration between AGU, ASLO, and TOS. Keep standing. Stay standing. This meeting is a collaboration between AGU, TOS, and ASLO, with AGU taking the lead. We have had great support from ASLO and TOS. In particular, Jenny Ramarui from TOS. Jenny, are you here? Jenny? And Helen Schneider-LeMay, from Oslo. Helen, are you around somewhere? They have been very supportive at every step along the way in the planning process for this meeting. Finally, there's the AGU staff who have done much of the behind-the-scenes work to get this meeting off the ground. There are many contributors, but I will mention three. Nicole Oliphant. Nicole, are you here? Nicole? Anywhere? Right over there, Nicole. Judy Daly, Nicole did the scientific program, helped to organize that. Judy Daly provided administrative assistance. Judy. And last but not least is Heather Nally. Heather, are you here somewhere? Yay, Heather, yay! There she is. This meeting has been Heather's life for the past 2 years, and she is responsible for pretty much everything you see. So if everything goes well at the meeting, you can give her the credit. So if anything goes poorly, you can blame me. So that's it for the credits. Let's have a round of applause. Thank you everybody. Now on to our program. Even for those of us with advanced degrees, the current political environment is baffling. Why, for example, would climate change denial appear to be the stated position at the very highest levels of our government? I don't think our distinguished speakers can really answer that. I don't think any of us can really answer that question. What most of us need to know practically is how we can continue to fund the research in the current environment, the research that we're so passionate about. The traditional model of government funding through competitively awarded grants seems to be on a long, slow decline. Our guests tonight have thought long and hard about this question. To help us sort this out, we have invited two experts on ocean policy. We wanted to present their perspectives on current ocean policy and funding from both an American and a European point of view, and to consider opportunities that we may not have thought of. I will introduce the U.S. speaker first. He will speak for about 20 minutes. Then our European guests will get introduced and speak. Finally, after both presentations, we will open the floor to your questions. We've asked both speakers to limit the length of their remarks to allow plenty of time for questions and feedback from you, the audience. So please, remember your questions, write them down, and come up and ask them during the Q&A. Our first speaker, Scott Rayder, is currently the senior advisor to the president of UCAR, the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. His job entails communicating UCAR's priorities to the White House, foundations, and private industry. As such, one could call him UCAR's chief lobbyist. And he's actually proud to hear himself called that. Scott has spent his career at the interface between government, private industry, and academia, having worked in all three. Among other jobs, he was chief of staff at NOAA from 2001 to 2008, with job duties similar to his current ones. During that time, NOAA's budget increased from $2.8 billion to $4.2 billion. Those were the good old days, huh? As part of his job, he was deeply moved when he had the chance or the opportunity to fly over New Orleans 2 days after Hurricane Katrina and witness the devastation. Scott comes from a family of military people, though he's never been in the military himself. He has 6 kids, and he tells me he does what he does because he feels a healthy environment is important to their future. I don't think any of us could disagree with that. So, enough of me. Let's hear from him. Scott?
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for that very kind introduction. And Fred mentioned I'm with UCAR, the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research. I should add that back in 1999, I was actually with the Consortium for Oceanographic Research and Education. So I worked for Admiral Watkins, who was the president of that institution, and then worked for Admiral Lautenbacher. And then I went over to NOAA when he went over as the NOAA administrator. So I've actually worked in both communities. So it's always interesting. When I was in the oceanographic community, I thought the atmospheric guys were really well organized. Now I'm in the atmospheric community and I'm saying, boy, the oceanographers are a lot better organized, okay, than their counterparts. But there's going to be a theme that's going to play through my speech tonight, which is I'd really like to eliminate the term oceans and atmosphere. And I'd like to see us move towards Earth system science. And I'm going to take the recently passed legislation, HR 353, the weather bill, to talk a little bit about that. So, quick show of hands, because I know some people have had some beer tonight. How many people are aware of the weather bill? Raise your hand. All right, I wish more of you were. And if you go online, you can look up the bill. So HR 353 is now law, and this is actually a good news story. This is a bill that passed through the House and the Senate with no opposition. It was signed by Trump into law April 18th, 2017. And if you look, it's the Weather Research and Forecasting Innovation Act of 2017. It took various parties working with Congress and with the administration 4 years to get this done. So there's a story there, which is nothing good ever happens quickly. It does take some time. But I want to take people through this because my contention is this weather bill is also an oceans bill. And that's what this community needs to know. So the purpose, if you look at this, you could take the word weather and substitute the word ocean, and it will work just as well. To improve NOAA's ocean research through a focused program of investment on affordable and attainable advances in observational, computing, and modeling capabilities. No one would argue with that. The purpose is pretty clean. There was a wide agreement among the different parties that came to work on this bill. But substitute ocean for weather, and I think you'll see what I mean. The bill is now law 11525. If you go to congress.gov, you can actually look at all the sections, and I want to take you through some of those sections at a very high level because you need to know what's in this bill. It's important to your future. It's important to both the oceanic and atmospheric communities, and I would argue it's important to where we need to go collectively if we're going to get the resources we need to do the research for the next generation and beyond. So Title I is the Weather Research and Forecasting Improvement. Oops, I lost an I there. I apologize. But if you look at the sections, right, you're going to see here, Section 104, the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program. I think we're going to need oceans to do that, okay? Call that a hunch. Observing system planning, no doubt about it, that's an ocean piece, okay? The annual report on computing resources is going to have a piece of that too because NOAA is running oceanic models, as is the Navy, okay? The U.S. Weather Research Program does fund some oceanographic pieces, and I'm going to come back to the authorization of appropriations. The biggest part of this bill has the least number of sections. And when Congress does that, that's something you should normally pay attention to. And this is where I'm very enthused, which is Title II, I'm going to talk a little more detail about this later, is improving subseasonal and seasonal forecasts. I should add, this section was put in by a Republican senator from South Dakota, John Thune, because members of the agriculture community in South Dakota told him, we need a 2-week to 3-month forecast. And I'm going to come back to that. Title III is Weather Satellite and Innovation. It focuses on NOAA's weather satellite responsibilities. Yes, they do take some ocean measurements, and that will be included in that section. If you look at Title IV, you see federal weather coordination, and there's some pieces in there that will affect the oceans as well. And in Title V, an entire section, and we are in the great state of Oregon. I want to thank Mrs. Bonamici from Oregon. This is her section of the bill. It's focused on tsunami warning education and research. Every section in there focusing on the need to have really good ocean research to implement operations at NOAA that protect life and property. So let's take it to the next step. I'm a big believer in talking about legislative sneakiness. This is not an official legislative term that you're going to hear anywhere else. But this is very important what they did in this bill, and as someone who worked on it, we're very happy about it. They put in definitions. Normally when Congress writes a bill, it is very amorphous. They do not like to define things. They use the rulemaking process to do that, and then it becomes law. So what they did here is they actually took the term seasonal, and that meant the time range between 3 months and 2 years, and then the subseasonals between 2 weeks and 3 months. I've often debated with some of the scientists at NCAR, is this Cleather? Is it Wymet? What is the new term that we're going to use to describe this? What I do know is you cannot do subseasonal, seasonal forecasting without having integration between the oceanic and atmospheric communities. It simply cannot be done. The oceans are the memory of the climate system that are going to enable this capability. The undersecretary here is at NOAA, and I would just point out this other provision goes to the weather enterprise. I think at some point we need to define what the ocean enterprise is well. So, there's a lot of oceans in HR 353, a lot. And this is a good news story that's been lost on a number of people. And I've had a number of people from the oceans community call me and say, how did you guys get that bill through? Let me add, this is the first piece of weather legislation that passed since 1992, in 2017. And it shouldn't take 25 years for communities to rally and get authorizations. Now, oceans, 96 times it's in there. And 92 times it's within the oceanic and atmospheric context of working in the NOAA space. The science committee that drafted this bill has jurisdiction. That's why they did it. Okay? I talked about our subseasonal seasonal forecasting problem. They clearly understand that in this bill. That is a good news story. Hurricanes and tsunamis, ocean event. Okay? You have two titles that are almost completely devoted to the oceans. They're 40% of the bill. Integrated Ocean Observing System, there's a comment there in the report. That speaks for itself. So why is it called a weather bill? And there's something in Congress called sequential referral. And it's where many bills die in the legislative process. So the House Science Committee has jurisdiction over the Weather Service, the NOAA Satellite Service, and parts of the NOAA Research Service. This is a play by the Science Committee to grab some of the ocean jurisdiction from the House Resources Committee. And when this bill went through, the House Resources Committee did not object to any of these provisions. And as a result, it did not go to the House Resources Committee, and they could negotiate directly with their Senate counterparts. It's kind of interesting. It's this jurisdictional rivalry. And NOAA, as an agency unto itself, has an interesting problem. In the House of Representatives, there's two committees that authorize NOAA, the House Resources Committee and the House Science Committee. But in the Senate, there's only one committee. In NSF, which is now my sponsoring agency, we have the exact opposite problem. There's actually two committees in the United States Senate, the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Subcommittee and the Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee, that authorize NSF programs like the Competes Act from last year, and there's only one committee in the House. It would be much easier to move legislation if it was a 1-to-1 ratio, but I can dream. Okay, why are these bills important? These are two individuals who are going to become very familiar to you here, and I would urge all of you, Fred, I want to thank you for bringing up Admiral Gallaudet's talk coming up Thursday. I would urge you to come and hear his pitch. I will tell you this, that I was someone who worked on the Commerce Transition Team for the Trump administration. Tim Gallaudet is a name that I put forward. He's a very sharp individual, PhD from Scripps, ran the Oceanography Office at the Navy, ran their cyber budget. He believes in climate change, okay, has stated it on the record, helped write the National Defense Reviews that said we accept it and are going to incorporate it into our operational planning. And this is a guy who went through the United States Senate under unanimous consent provision. The reason 353 is important to him is he was asked at his Senate hearing, Senate nomination hearing, do you support it? And he said, yes. So this is a good news story. The gentleman underneath him is Neil Jacobs. I don't know how many folks here know Neil. He worked with Panasonic and before that AirDat. He has been nominated to be the other deputy person at NOAA. Neil was also asked, did he support HR 353? His answer was yes. So the provisions in this bill right now are have earned the support of the two highest individuals at NOAA. Neil has not been confirmed yet. If things work out right, he's going to be confirmed what's called the President's Day package coming up next week. More importantly, Barry Myers has been nominated to be the head of NOAA. And Barry was asked if he was going to be confirmed. Would he support HR 353? He said absolutely. He actually helped write provisions in the bill. So the three senior political people at NOAA right now will support this. That's a good news story. I would also say that in Barry Myers' confirmation hearing, he acknowledged climate change under questioning from Senator Markey from Massachusetts. So this bill has a lot of legs. It's got a lot of political support at a lot of different levels. And it's important, again, weather and oceans are both important in this bill. So I want to bring up something that happened sneakily in the FY18 that's going to relate to this weather bill. The National Weather Service is another office within NOAA. And this is the first time I've seen this in my life being around NOAA authorization appropriation bills since 1992. And they put in this line that I've underlined, which is the Weather Service is also responsible for issuing operational climate forecasts for the United States. Given the authorization components in HR 353 and what the Senate appropriators are saying, it is very clear that Congress, at least the Senate, their sense is that the Weather Service should go into the subseasonal seasonal forecasting regime, and those forecasts, the official government forecasts, are going to come from the Weather Service. Pay attention to this. I think this is something that the new administration, particularly Gallaudet and Jacobs, are going to pay attention to because it's in the sweet spot. And I would add, where I am now at UCAR and NCAR, I've had a number of companies come to me. The one thing they want is 2-week to 3-month forecasts. Okay, so that was appropriations language. This is the authorization, Title II. And I just want to bring up a couple of things under Section 201. If you look at all the items in here, and I've highlighted some of these, they are ocean-related events. And what are we looking at? We're looking at how to improve our understanding and predictability of events that affect life and property. Economic security is a great thing to sell to people, but it's also national security. We have a melting Arctic. We have to understand from a national economic security perspective, what are we going to do in that space? So this subseasonal and seasonal forecasting piece is very important. This is Section 201. Ooh, what a nice transition. This is the second section, which talks about cooperation. I think this is very important. NOAA can't do it alone, but they talk in here about Earth systems prediction capability. I think if we have anybody here from the United States Navy, we know Dave Titley, the former oceanographer of the Navy, was a big fan of Earth systems prediction capability. That is in the bill. And if you look at bullet number 3, they have to work with the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security. This is all, I think, a good news story, integrating federal capabilities. Here in 201, they talk a little bit about funds to states. If a state matches funds, NOAA can put money in it. So if you come from a state that has a surplus or wants to invest in sub-seasonal to seasonal, you can actually get required matching funds. This is a first. I did not think that this was going to get into the bill, but this is a good news story. And in an administration that, quote, values federalism, unquote, we should think about how to use this provision. Okay, finally, improving sub-seasonal, there's going to be a series of reports that are going to have to go back to Congress. I love reports because it's always great to tell Congress about the value of what your research brings to the economic and national security of the country and, for that matter, the globe. And if you'll see here, they want this analysis of sub-seasonal, seasonal forecasts, specific plans, an identification of research, and a consultation. Your input to this process is going to be extremely important. Tim Gallaudet should hear it from you. Craig McLean, the head of NOAA Research, should hear it from you. I know they're hearing it from me. And there's no reason why you should talk about what we can bring and ask NOAA what is the formal process by which they're going to collect this data, integrate it, and use it. Finally, I want to bring up this last piece. I mentioned it earlier, but I really think it is important, which is this weather industry and weather enterprise structure. I know that Tim Gallaudet at NOAA is pushing the blue economy, okay? We've had the weather enterprise and called the weather economy on the dry side. We really need to tease out what does this blue economy mean. I think it's extraordinarily important. And I think one of the things our respective communities don't do enough of is communicating our value. I'm going to come back to that a little bit, but people really need to understand the value of ocean science. I was telling a couple people before I came in here, I got to work with a living legend early in my career, Admiral Jim Watkins. And I got to go to the Hill with him and brief U.S. senators. Admiral Watkins used to tell all the senators, Senator Stevens from Alaska, Senator Inouye from Hawaii, oceanography won the Cold War. That's a very powerful message, okay? I might be dating myself because some people might say the Cold War, but it was really important. And if there's a book you should read, it's called Blind Man's Bluff. And in that book, it explains what oceanography did to advance U.S. national security interests. Explaining our value going forward is going to be more important than ever. Okay, I'm a guy who cares about money. Does anybody in here care about money? Okay, there we go, a little laughing, come on. It's what makes the research happen. And so what's nice here is they've actually put in an authorization of appropriations. It's $26.5 million. Is it enough? It's a start, okay? And my concern always is, having working with federal budgets in a lot of my life, let's get the program start and then figure out how to grow the number. I always think that's a better way to do it. But I'm optimistic that we can start moving out in this area. And there's fair game for anybody here to ask Gallaudet on Thursday, what does he intend to do to start this line? Because they've all supported the bill. And I'll have to let Tim know that he's expecting the question. I hope you ask it. A few points to consider. I talked about this, first major weather legislation, Thune put it in, hurricane forecast in there, Title V is tsunamis, unanimity. But the point here is, they're bipartisan. Weather is not a Democratic, Republican, conservative, liberal issue. Everybody gets rained on the same. Doesn't matter what your ideology is. And when we worked this bill in the Hill, that was actually a great selling point for a lot of the people. I think there's more to be done in the ocean community and the atmospheric community together to do this. And I should add this little one at the bottom. I was fortunate enough to work with Ned Estenso, who is the head of NOAA Research, and actually a former AGU president who helped build the building at 2000 Florida Ave. One day he took me aside and says, remember, Scott, it's one liquid, two densities. They're combined. The two systems work together. The atmosphere is probably the fabric by which it's connected to the ocean. We have to figure this out, and that term that we should be using now is Earth Systems Science. Now, one of the things that our community is doing in the atmospheric community, and I want to allay any fears here with this, is we are talking and working with the National Academy of Sciences, Board on Atmospheric Science and Climate, on potentially a weather decadal. The Earth Observing Decadal just came out from NASA. We would like to do a weather decadal. Let me be clear. We want the ocean community at that table working with us. It is important that you are there. Tony Busalaki, my boss, is a member of the National Academy of Engineering. He's also the first oceanographer to head UCAR in its history. That's a great story when the largest atmospheric research institution in the country actually selects an oceanographer, because we understand our science should be as integrated as the environment we're trying to predict. So these are some of the bullets that talk about what we're trying to do with weather decadal. Other communities have used these decadal processes to great success, and one of the things they help to do is take undulations out of the political system. Final point on the weather decadal. You've seen these three guys before. My understanding is both Myers and Jacobs supported a weather decadal in their Senate questionnaires. They got a questionnaire. I don't know who put the question in that questionnaire. I wish I knew that guy, but he was really smart. The point being here now is they're committed to it because they put pen to paper. We think if we could get a weather decadal as the next piece of legislation with input from this ocean community, maybe we call it an Earth System Science decadal, we could really build something that will allow us to kind of work through some of the political undulations in the system. Okay, Congress, because I work with them and we've got a diversity of people in the room, and I want to make a few points. Right now, they're going to be focused on oversight. What that means is they're always looking for problems, okay? House Science Committee is now going to have hearings on some issues related to researchers at Boston University and sexual misconduct, okay? It is what it is. It's political, but it's a problem. They're taking advantage of that situation. Always do the right thing. Oversight is a dangerous thing because it can come to haunt you. But there are some good news stories. S3084, this is the bill that authorizes NIST and NSF, my sponsoring agency. We're really proud of the fact that you had Republicans and Democrats work together and then send that bill, a Republican Congress, sent it to a Democratic president and signed it. That means people like the research that NSF and NIST are doing. So much so they can put aside their partisan biting and make it work. This is a great story. The fact that we got the weather bill through, I'm really excited about, because with unanimous consent, no one opposed it. And then finally, the space weather research bill is something I'm working on. We passed it out of the Senate, but this is another area where I think an Earth system science approach is going to make tremendous progress. Our communities have to be engaged like never before, and I'd like to have them engaged together. Third-party validation is really helpful. If there's an industry that can support what you're doing, have them do it. Key messages for policymakers. So a lot of people here may not have been up talking to Congress. This is what we tell our members, okay? Make the case for this continued federal investment. It is important. It undergirds so many things in our economy. We like to make the point that all the work that's being done on fracking was funded by the National Science Foundation. The internet, DARPA. So many things that became economic success stories came out of federal research. We need to tell that story, okay? And don't be afraid to tell it. Go meet with local members. Robust support, and this is in my area, weather, water, climate, air quality, and space weather, and we say education because we've got to build the workforce of the future. The pipeline is important. The atmospheric ocean and the funding at NSF, NOAA, and NASA, vitally important. And then provide an example. I have found that that really resonates with staff and members. Explain to them why it's important. In the end, we're going to make this thing work. So I thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions after my colleague Siggy speaks, and thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Scott has told me that he's very eager to entertain your questions about the bill that was the funding bill that was just signed a few days ago. He's very eager to be able to explain that to you. So that's one question you might think about asking. Our next speaker will be introduced by my colleague Alessandra Conversi. Alessandra.
Hello to everyone, and I'm from the National Research Council of Italy, and I am the Oslo Vice Chair here. Vice Chair. So it is with great pleasure that I'm introducing the European Policy Plenary speaker, Sigi Gruber. Siggy has been working with the European Commission for more than 20 years, since 1991. And in her career, she has often crossed paths with training, international collaborations, and research and innovation. She has, in fact, worked in both the training and the research directorate of the European Commission, where she was responsible for implementing several programs, including Leonardo da Vinci Training Program, the European Charter for Researchers, and the Indo-European Research and Innovation Partnership. Since 2011, Siggy has been working on international cooperation with the American continent, and she has coordinated the signing of a Galway Statement, which is an agreement between Europe, USA, and Canada, intended to increase the knowledge of the Atlantic Ocean. From this, the Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance was launched. Since 2014, Siggy is the head of the Marine Resource Unit in the Directorate for Research and Innovation of the European Commission. And this is the unit that defines and implements the European research objectives for the marine environment. For example, the Blue Growth Agenda, the European Integrated Maritime Policy, and the Transatlantic Ocean Research Alliance. In her talk today, Siggy presents some examples of European standing and success in research and international collaborations. Siggy will also present current research and training opportunities open to non-European citizens of all ages. Please welcome Sigi Gruber.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. What an honor for me to be here. I would like really to thank the organizing committee for inviting me. Now, before I start, let me also just explain, when we refer to the European Union, and I apologize for the jargon that we use very often, the European Union is made up of 28 member states. So when I refer to the European Union, think about this huge ensemble of different countries. And I will now really, I would like to walk you through what are we doing in the European Union and how are we trying to strive for cooperation. Let me start with a short overview, a historical overview about the evolution of the EU Framework Programme since it started in 1984. At that time, and until 2006, it had always only a four-time stable lifetime of funding. But as from 2007, it moved to a 7 years funding period. To note also that we celebrate this year 20 years of a science and technology agreement with the United States. And overall, United States is our first partner when it comes to international cooperation. And this is not surprising, given the many historical ties that Europe and the United States have still and join up, not only when it comes to research cooperation, but also when we look at the Atlantic, which unites us and is our shared resource. Horizon 2020 is the world's largest and most open research and innovation program with a very stable funding over 7 years. And I'm very proud, actually, to be able to present it. If we look at the funding that we have available, it's about $95 billion for all the science fields. This, in addition, obviously, to the private money, the private investment that this money attracts. It promises more breakthroughs, ideas, and it really tries to bring the ideas from the lab to the market. Europe's political leader and the members of the European Parliament have put it at the heart of the European Union's blueprint for smart, inclusive, and sustainable growth and jobs. By coupling research and innovation, Horizon 2020 is helping to achieve this with its emphasis of the 3 pillars, which is excellent science, industrial leadership, and societal challenges. And after nearly 4 years of implementation, we have signed 15,000 grant agreements with about an envelope of $33 billion and with 65,000 participations, not only from researchers, but also from the private sectors in Europe and around the world. And we would need actually twice the money if we would be able to fund all the high-quality proposals that we have received. Now, the funding, how are these funding opportunities set out? We normally work with multi-annual work programs, which cover the large support available. And we have just launched the last cycle of our work programs for 2018 and until 2020, but the funding actually is for 18 and 19, and the envelope is about $37 billion. And how do we prepare these work programs? By large, we work within our legal framework and by following our international and European strategies, the international commitments. But we also consult a lot with the stakeholders. And we look at the results of previously funded projects. What are these projects? I will give you an example afterwards. But first, I wanted really to put you into the policy context. First of all, we have Commissioner Moedas, who is the equivalent of the science minister, and his leitmotif have been the 3 O's: open science, open innovation, and open to the world. So the program is applying an open data policy, for example, and it is open to participation from all over the world. We also, when it comes to marine research, we fully support the EU common fisheries policies, the integrated maritime policy, blue growths, and the related sea basin strategies, because we have the Mediterranean Sea, the Black Sea, the Baltic, and for each sea we have a separate strategy, which then we try as well to connect. We obviously adhere as well fully to the Sustainable Development Goals, to the Paris Climate Agreement, and to the International Ocean Governance document, which the Commission has adopted 1.5 years ago. Now, I said before that we have tried really, first of all, we look into the research projects. If you look at this slide, it gives you a short overview about what we have done in 10 years of funding. First of all, we have spent for 1,200 projects around $4.2 billion. And these different projects have produced results for marine and maritime policy, environmental protection, marine and offshore energy, which is a really promising sector now in the EU, food security and food safety, observation of the oceans and the sea, the whole value chain when it comes to blue biotech, the pharmaceuticals, alternative protein sources, the new marine value chains, but also the ecosystem-based approach when it comes to the sustainable management of fisheries and maritime transport, and obviously marine technologies. Now, we have tried to take one step further and have done a pilot and looked at 40 projects and have analyzed these 40 projects to see what do they provide actually in terms of results which can inform policymakers. And the projects, or we have identified 7 key policy recommendations for a strong European blue economy, which again found their way back in the definition of the priorities of the work program. So that is a little bit the feedback loop that we are trying really to achieve and to implement now more and more. And while these recommendations, I'm not going to read them out, but while all these recommendations are very relevant for European policy making, when it comes to ocean sciences, we cannot do it without international partnerships. So international partnerships for us are a must. And I would like now just to present to you a couple of success stories on how these partnerships between the EU and the US have unfolded over the last months and years. Now, you will certainly I don't need to remind you about the terrible hurricanes that happened in August and later, but it was under the International Charter of the Space and Major Disasters that the European Union Copernicus Emergency Management Service was activated upon request of the US Federal Emergency Management Agency. And in nearly 3 weeks, and without any financial contribution, our colleagues in the EMS, which is operated by the European Commission's Joint Research Center and its related agencies, have supplied many, many different maps, which together with the US maps really were a fundamental tool to relieve operations by US disaster responses. And equally important were the different Copernicus services in the Caribbean when they operated together with the Netherlands, with the UK, and with France. Here, just another map that was delivered by the Copernicus services. I would like to move on now to another example, another success story. It was mentioned in the introduction. It is the Canada-EU-US cooperation success story when we launched the Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance by signing the Galway Statement in May 2013. And thanks to the strong support and leadership of NOAA Assistant Administrator for Oceanic and Atmospheric Research and Acting Chief Scientist Dr. Craig McLean, also the support from NSF, Dr. Rick Murray, Director for Ocean Science Division, Geosciences, and his colleague Don Rice, as well as Paola Bontempi, Program Manager from NASA Ocean Biology and Biogeochemistry. We have made a lot of progress on the US side, and I would also like to thank the colleagues from the Canadian Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Dr. Aaron McPherson and Trevor Schwarzenegger. Together, we have managed really to work now to improve ocean health and stewardship, to promote the management of the resources, but particularly by looking into ecosystems assessment and forecasts. And we are trying to generate new tools to increase resilience and conserve the rich biodiversity that we have in the Atlantic Ocean. And we are trying to do this by aligning our existing programs, by aligning existing mechanisms, and by pooling them together. So that's what it looks like, actually, in reality. This is a Canadian vessel, but it can also be an Irish vessel. It can be a vessel from France, hopefully one from Germany. In future, there will be one as well from the US, from NOAA. And these vessels host on board scientists from Europe, from Canada, and from the United States. And they have now completed 6 of these transects. And the plan is now underway for a more purpose-driven mapping campaign supported by NOAA, in addition to the opportunistic transects that we have profited until now. And hopefully one day we will have our dream coming through, that we will have a high-resolution map of the Atlantic Ocean. In addition to the mapping, we have also funded a lot of ongoing projects. Just to name a few, I have put them here on, you might know them. It's Atlantis, it's Sponges, it is Atlas. We have currently 15 ongoing projects for the Atlantic and 4 for the Arctic, and 320 research groups working together. And we would like to see many more. So if any one of you actually carries out any research on the Atlantic, please come forward, because the Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance is not a closed shop. It is a platform for exchange experience. The Atlantic is so huge that it needs all the research that we can fund and that you can actually provide. Let me turn now again back to the work program and share with you what do we have in the pipeline for funding ocean science, or like we call it, marine research. Now, oops, what have I done now? Oops, so I'm back. So for 2018 and 19, we have funded, we have earmarked 239, which is equivalent to 290 million US dollars to sustainably harvest the potential of aquatic and marine resources while protecting biodiversity and enhancing climate resilience. And we have 4 thematic areas and 1 international cooperation, which embraces the different things. So we look into opportunities. We have calls for climate and oceans, for food and oceans, marine value chains, land and sea, think plastics in the ocean, and for international cooperation. And international cooperation, it links it up to what I said before. We continue actually to have a focus on the Atlantic, because if we take the Atlantic that connects conditions and maintains the life support across the communities in the north, but also in the south, and is very important as well for the south-south relationship, we wanted to take a systemic approach to the Atlantic Ocean as a whole and invest in research and in cooperative opportunities from Antarctica to the Arctic. And because of that, Commissioner Moedas has signed an agreement as well with the minister from Brazil and with the minister from South Africa. And we are earmarking, or we have earmarked, the equivalent of 78 million US dollars for really this cooperation. So what we want is to connect what's going on now in the north and going southwards to take really the systems approach. There is another important international flagship initiative. You might have heard about our Seas and Oceans initiative put forward and driven by the countries of the G7. So we have as well included in our work program 2019 a focus, and it's the EU contribution to the G7 ongoing work. Again, it is open for participation from not only the G7 countries, but from anyone who would like to join. And our focus is on 3 aspects. First of all, it is to look into a blue cloud where we want to enhance interoperability. It's observations and forecasting, and it is technology driven, and those technologies are not yet defined. Somehow the clock doesn't work, and I don't know how much time I still have. Sorry for that. So why should you actually participate in Horizon 2020? There are a lot of reasons, and I'm not going to read out, but I would like to draw your attention to what is under other. So first of all, it is new research avenues, and Scott already mentioned that. It is really connecting the communities. It is the exchange possibilities, and it is the cross-disciplinary, the cross-sectorial, and the cross-border fertilization, which are really valuable reasons why you should get engaged in Horizon 2020. Now, there are rules of participation. First of all, participating in the framework program is not automatically to get funding. Normally, under normal circumstances, but there are exceptions. For industrialized countries, participation is open, but funding is not automatic for any collaborative project. However, for all the individual actions, being it through the European Research Council, which are really the bottom-up, excellence-driven fellowships for principal investigators, or for the Marie Curie grantees, there you can get money. So I really invite you to apply for that. It is not always very easy. This is a terrible slide. It's against any pedagogic really presentation of how one should present, but I have put it in because there has been quite a myth around the difficulty to participate in Horizon 2020. And we have now 4 different ways on how we can ease your participation. And so if anyone is interested, please come to me and I will explain you without going into details now. This is just an example that you can actually participate. And we also have a one-stop shop where you can find all the information. It is actually easy to navigate. But if you are not convinced that you should participate in Horizon 2020, we offer you another opportunity. All our research proposals are peer-reviewed, and we need all the time really to renew our database. So if you have an interest of becoming an evaluator of Horizon 2020, first of all, it is done remotely. Secondly, it is paid. Thirdly, which I have not put on the slide, it's your best way into understanding Horizon 2020. So sign up in the database. And last but not least, you probably all remember our An Ocean for Life event, which the European Union hosted in Malta. We have pledged, together with all our international partners, for 7.2 billion euros in financial pledges. We need now to follow that through. And the European Union has committed, we have committed that we would like to continue to fund 250 million euro per year in ocean science, but also maritime-related research activities. And this is a target that we have put ourselves to continue, and hopefully we will manage to do so. Our oceans and seas are probably the most unacknowledged regulators of the planet, and I really would like to stress the word unacknowledged. You probably think everyone knows about, but as Scott said, that is not true. When it comes to policy making, I can guarantee you I have to fight for every single time I put the word ocean, into any policy document. So the future of energy, medicine, food, feed, protein, transportation, security, sea level rise, it will be driven by a system about which we know relatively little and about which we are totally still disconnected from, how I used to call them, the land-minded people. The need to have a system of governance and a habit and drive of global cooperation around the oceans needs to be built now, and you are all key actors to make this happen. So please do it. The ocean needs you, and the policymakers as well. Thank you very much.
Please.
water.
Thank you for those really fascinating and very interlocking talks. That was great. So now the floor is open. Does anybody have any questions? Don't all leap up at once. I have a question.
Sure.
These new administrators at NOAA, Siggy was very much emphasizing the open data policy in the European Union. So I'd like to know whether the new administrators at NOAA have such a commitment as well.
So that's a great question. In the weather bill, there's actually a commercial weather data pilot. I should do disclosure. My organization, UCAR, is the umpire for satellite-based commercial weather data buys. I'd like to remind people that referees and umpires get beat up. So currently, Barry Myers and Neil Jacobs have taken an opinion publicly at the AMS Washington Forum where they've said if the government has bought the data, they can then distribute it free and open. That current policy, the free and open policy, I think has been extraordinarily good for the United States. And I'd actually say it's great for me to see the European Union coming over to more open data policies. At the same time, we might be becoming more restricted. I find that quite ironic. Companies like AccuWeather that just take federal data and repackage it and sell it are making money. I don't begrudge them that, that's fine. But my bigger concern in this data policy, Fred, is that I don't want the research community ever to have to pay for data. And that to me is where we draw the line. We have got to be able at least to run hurricane models, et cetera, against operational models in research mode. And the only way to do that is to get that data free and open. I think this is an issue to watch. And I can tell you that the data buys that NOAA took in the commercial satellite weather area around radio occultation did not pan out. Steve Volz, the administrator at NOAA, the satellite administration, actually said at AMS the data was not of sufficient quality to go into the numerical weather prediction models. And now the issue is going to be, well, where do we get that data from? Because we know it improves forecast skill. The same can be said of the ocean data. So I think data policy is a very important issue to watch over the next 2 years.
You have anything to add? No?
No.
Okay. Did I see anybody else? So please, the central microphone there. Yeah, right back there.
Scott, Siggy, Mike Devaney. Thanks for taking the time to come and talk to us today and talk about opportunities for the future. My question is directed at Scott. Scott, I wonder if you could take a few minutes and look into your crystal ball and tell us what you think the omnibus appropriation is going to look like for the science community, particularly the ocean and weather community for the coming year.
Crystal ball, huh? So let me just, this could be a bad forecast. I think actually we're going to do okay. I think one of the areas that we have emphasized at UCAR with Congress is funding stuff in the coastal ocean area, littorals. I think you're going to see some money there. I think the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program at NOAA, which has been authorized in the weather bill, is going to see some new funding. So I'm optimistic right now. But this also gets to the larger point, which always bothers me about policy, and I cannot speak for Siggy and my European colleagues, but in the United States, we don't put money on anything until after the disaster happens. It would be really nice to get ahead of the problem, and we know there's going to be problems. I'm optimistic that NOAA is going to get an ocean-class vessel. They need it. I think we've got to refresh a lot of this infrastructure. We have not done that, and I will say that was actually a disappointment to me in terms of the infrastructure program the administration put forward. They talked about waterways, but no one talked about mapping or charting them. They didn't talk about scientific infrastructure. Big science, like you see in Horizon 2020, requires resources. How many people in the United States would like to know over the next 10 years that they had a commitment of X billion of dollars to work to? I would love to have that program. I just don't think that Congress and the administration could ever fund something like that. So I'm cautiously optimistic, Mike, that what's going to happen is Congress is going to be responsible and help, but don't look for any huge breakthroughs where there's going to be a flood of money and resources opening to the community. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, we'll take one from the right hand, or from the center again. Okay.
Okay, I'll start. So my name is Martin Wisbeck. Thanks both, Siggy and Scott, for your great interventions. Scott, I have a question for you. Siggy very much pointed out that from the European perspective, ocean observing, ocean science needs to be done internationally. I think, and she made a lot of efforts in also structurally make that easy for the European science mission to do so, to work collaboratively. I didn't hear a remark either in the bill or in your statement about international, about the future of ocean science coming from the US support. So maybe you can say something about that.
Sure, happy to. So the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Committee in Paris is actually funded out of a line in the State Department, which is under UNESCO. This administration has cut that line. So I don't know what that's going to mean. Congress, in some cases, has put it back in. The U.S. Group on Earth Observations was in that line. That line got cut. At this point, we do not have an Undersecretary for Environment at the State Department, nor do we have an Assistant Secretary for Oceans, Environment, and Science that will look at that account and put money on it. So I am deeply concerned that pragmatic international engagement may not be a policy of the current administration in this area. I don't see it. And I'm concerned about it because when I was at NOAA, one of the things we worked on was Parada, the Atlantic Basin buoys. I love the Siggy's point on north-south. I think that's spot on. We've got to build these observational relationships between the developed and developing world. It's a win-win for everybody. But right now, until we get people in place even to make some of these decisions, I think they're just going to atrophy on the policy sideline. Sadly. Sorry, that's not a better answer.
Right hand mic there.
Yeah, so this is Kay Beidel. I had a follow-up question related to Martin's question. So, Scott, you gave a nice overview about converging communities and ideas among atmospheric scientists and oceanographers. And Siggy, you gave some nice examples of success stories where there was interactive collaborations between U.S., Canadian, European scientists. Both of you emphasized Earth systems context. Scott, I was wondering, in a related fashion, within the weather bill, or as you want it to sort of evolve into the Earth systems bill, are there tangible opportunities for European scientists to actually interface with that?
Absolutely, and it would seem to me, in terms of the point Siggy made, in terms of engagement, and sub-seasonal, seasonal, we should be doing that together, because it's got to be done globally to be done right. So I look at that as a tremendous opportunity for the European scientific community to work with their US colleagues to build a new capability. Just as an example in this space, a company came to UCAR several years ago and wanted a water forecast in 207 countries. At that time, there were 209 countries that did not sell Coca-Cola products, okay? North Korea and Cuba. We're now down to 208 because they're selling Coke in Cuba, I guess. But it was interesting. They wanted a 2-week to 3-month forecast, and this was 3 years ago. And I was shocked because we talked, they were committed to doing this, and we gave them a scientific pathway, but we told them it's got to be a global science project. The United States, we can't do that at UCAR and NCAR. That's not even my domain. I will say another thing in this area that I find interesting that I've never seen before in my career is the rise of the private sector, albeit I think in the United States more than the European Union, where there are companies that are now using machine learning and artificial intelligence to go in and do analytics in the weather, water, climate, ocean domain and provide high-resolution forecasts. If you haven't heard of Jupiter Intel, this is a company that's coming out of Silicon Valley. They just took 4 of our best data scientists. I don't begrudge them. But IBM with Watson, they're going down this pathway. Who would have thought that the private sector would find a way to build products and services that enhance other people's business models? I would not have seen that. I'd seen it with the US military, but not in private sector domain. So I think that's another area to look out for too. The private sector is growing into this space, and I think it's really important to be receptive because they come with some new ideas, and I would say that they come with money.
Okay, let's go to the center.
Hi there, my name is Savannah Lightholtz, and I had a question for Scott. You mentioned that farmers were really interested in weather forecasts 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time. Is there any preparation that the government or like House bill, the weather bill, is dealing with to prepare farmers for climate change and also help them understand the processes that are going to change their livelihoods?
So for the record, I want everybody to know that She was not, I never paid her to ask this question. So when I was at NOAA, something we started was NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System. So I was the chief of staff at NOAA in the Bush 43 administration. I would say we were reasonable in the climate issue in a different way, which was we could talk about it. And one of the things that we did is we started this program, NIDIS, because it came out of the Western Governors Association. And what we did is we set up a drought monitoring network across the western United States. But it's not really a drought monitoring network, it's actually a climate service. Let's call it what it is. Now, in other ways, we're providing these services, and I think we have to talk about them. I find agriculture in America is an easy sell with people in, I'll say, parts of red state America, if you want to call it that. That's a great sell. Let them know, because agriculture is vitally important. They get the connection to food. I would also say that we've done it in other areas. When I was in NOAA, we regulated elkhorn and staghorn coral. Some people might remember this. We didn't say it was climate change. Go back and look at the rule. It says it was due to warmer water temperatures. We didn't say what caused the warmer water temperatures, but we said, yeah, we know what the problem is. I think you're going to see some intricate ways to deal with climate change in this administration. I also think in some ways, given the administration's withdrawal from the Paris agreements, I think you're also going to see the private sector's pricing this in. They're already down that pathway. And we have to figure out how to work with them and so they can make better decisions. I also think there's a devolution, at least in the United States, I can't speak for the Europeans, down to state and local governance on this issue. Where I live in Boulder, we're very climate conscious. Okay? The state of Colorado is trying to go by 2030. We have 2 gubernatorial candidates who want 100% of energy in Colorado by 2030 to be completely renewable. That's incredible. That's a wonderful policy development. And we may not get there, but striving to get there is going to improve a lot of things with it. I think we have to think that way. In the current climate context, I think that's a good way to think about it.
Thank you.
On the right there.
Hi, my name's Dick Kraut. I'm from Naval Research Lab, and I guess my question is for Siggy. One of the things that we've noticed, or as a remote sensing person, is that Europe really has their stuff together. That they have the Copernicus system. They're launching synthetic aperture radars, not just 1 but 2. They're launching Landsat birds, not just 1 but 2. They're getting ready, I think, later this week to launch Sentinel-3B, which is sea surface temperature, ocean color, an altimeter. How do you get 28 states to get together and support some of these things? I know that in the past that the private industry had a lot to do with a lot of the satellite research and a lot of the things that happen in Europe. So is there a good example that we could pull together in the United States and do something like that?
It might, thank you for the question. It might sound very easy when we talk about the European Union, but believe me, it is not always very easy. But we try to really work by compromises. And we do a lot of, it's bottom up and top down. And both are equally important. So you have to take the top down decisions, but you have as well to accompany the processes by bottom-up, a lot of bottom-up consultations. And that's probably how we reach then compromises. But it is not an easy process. And a lot is done in the corridors before the big decisions are taken. We also have the decision processes in the European Union are split between, on the one side, the member states, and on the other side, the members of the European parliaments, which are really sent to Brussels by direct voting systems. And all the decisions are taken by these 2 important bodies. And so it takes sometimes for the Horizon 2020 successor program, we reckon we are working now for the successor program, which should start in 21. We are now trying to put it on the table for the decision makers in June, and it will take 1.5 to 2 years before it is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go back to the middle, please.
Hi, my name is Olivera Stojlovic, and my question is actually for Sigi. I was wondering, because you actually mentioned a lot of collaborations with the United States and Canada. I was wondering what are your plans, if there are some, to actually include China, Japan, and like Indonesia and all those countries, because they actually do have a lot of influence on economy and like climate change and everything. Thank you.
Yes. Now, while we have put a focus on what I mentioned to you, the sea basin strategies. So it is the Mediterranean, it's the Black Sea, it is the Atlantic, and the Atlantic is huge. We also work globally on certain issues. For example, when it comes to food safety and food security, but particularly food safety issues, Europe imports about 65% of its shrimps consumption from countries from Southeast Asia. So we have as well quite some interesting collaborative research going on with those countries. China is eligible and can participate. They participate now in one of the big plastic-related projects. So we are looking into what can science and technology do? How can we contribute to diminishing marine litter in the sea? And that's where China is a partner. They're a partner in many other issues. Indonesia, we are now working as well for the next our ocean events, which will take place in Bali end of October. And for that, we will see what we can pledge. And hopefully we can pledge and bring along as well European industry, because the industry issue came up. And we have a target in the projects which we identify. So most of the, or let's say half of the projects are collaborative projects, research projects, but then we have about 30% as well, which we call innovation actions. And there we have a must of 30% participation from industries. Industry must really participate in the innovation. And that is where we try as well now. There's a lot of research and done by the industry going on with countries in Southeast Asia and China. And that is as well an angle that we try to cooperate with.
Thank you.
One more question in the center there.
Thank you. My name is Peter Haugen. I'm presently the chair of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. And I want to get back to international collaboration. I think it's very clear from my point of view that the US community is really important in international and global collaboration. But I guess my question is for both of you, and it deals with how to use different fora and different collaboration agreements around the world. In particular, you have the G7, which is doing their thing together. And we see in the IOC, we issued last year a first so-called global ocean science report showing that actually Asian countries are those which increase the fastest when it comes to ocean science and technology these days. So I wonder if both of you could have a comment on how you would see these different arenas and groups working together. We've had good links to G7 in the wide UN family that I represent, but what are your thoughts about the use of these different fora for international collaboration? Thank you.
Why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you, Peter, for the question. Now, we are very actively engaged in the G7 process, and we are a part of the working group dealing with the future of our oceans and seas. And as far as I remember, and it was actually promoted by us as well, that we have invited IOC in the different stakeholder workshops. And it goes without saying that what happens in the G7 context is very important. But again, when it comes to ocean, it is not the G7, it's not the G20. I think it needs to be a global initiative. Otherwise, how can we take a systemic approach to the oceans that I mentioned just when I was closing my speech? It will not happen. So from our side, the European Commission, our mandate is really to be very inclusive. So whoever really knocks at our door and would like to cooperate with us has an open door. So we are happy to embrace IOC and all the cooperative activities. You will, I can guarantee that. I mean, you know it, we do work together. And it is important not only in the G7 or G20 context. It is very important that we team up with everything which is going on by our colleagues working on the climate issues. I see that there is still a divide between the ocean communities and the climate communities, and the denial very often to recognize the very important role of the oceans. And I cannot say this time over time enough, but that is the big issue. So I think we have somehow a collective responsibility. Every one of us has to make sure that we work with the communities and that we open the doors for whatever we can do, because the ocean is so big and needs us.
Yeah. Let me add, I think one of the best ways to work in the context of the current administration, it is very clear to me that they have an affinity for retired military officers. And I think that's okay. I worked for one, and he was very reasonable. Actually, I worked for two of them. And I think that the context of Secretary Mattis talking about how the Department of Defense is taking climate into everything they do operationally is a good story. And I would urge you to use that framework in terms of people trust in the United States, they trust the U.S. military. If the U.S. military says climate change is happening and we don't understand the role of the oceans in it, they're going to listen. Admiral Richardson, the Chief of Naval Operations, has started I think it's going to be $1 billion initiative called Task Force Ocean. Actually, you can ask Admiral Gallaudet when he's here about that, because he was part of implementing that. And it's kind of a new era, reopening a new era in American oceanography. And I think that's an interesting case to play. On the non-defense side, I don't know who's going to lead. When I left the Bush administration in 2008, we had the Oceans Act, and we actually put together the National Ocean Council at the White House. My understanding is they're restructuring OSTP. They're going to go from something like 72 committees just on STC alone, from 72 to 50. I don't know who's going to own oceans. So I think I would urge you to kind of focus on the DoD Navy side first and then see how that plays out, because I think they're going to be the lead. At this point, whether the United States decides to engage with the IOC through UNESCO and state, I have no idea how that's going to play out. And right now, I can tell you, I have been asked in certain contexts to come up with names for these State Department jobs. It is very hard to find people that want to go into some of these positions because they don't know if they're going to be able to negotiate a position and be overruled a week later. So to me, the oceans are global, they're interdependent. So I would like to have the United States at that table in that negotiation. I'm just not confident that's going to happen anytime soon.
Okay, thank you. Let's thank our speakers again.
Thank you. Thank you.